good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here, and I also want to make a special acknowledgement of the Seneca and Tuscarora peoples, who are the original and unceded custodians of these lands and beautiful waters, and I had to educate myself a little bit about their legacy. The Seneca and Tuscarora are part of the Six Nations Confederacy, so also known as the Haudenosaunee or the Mohawk or Iroquois. They all speak the same language. And I do know something about those communities because they are related to the Ontario side. And I'm not sure if people here are aware, I learned this about 20 years ago, the Six Nations Confederacy is one of the oldest living participatory democracies in the world. And they were at war with each other for 1,000 years. And then they signed the Great Law of Peace. And that influenced the US Constitution. So there are mechanisms within these communities. And anyway, it would be interesting to get point of view of some of those individuals maybe in future conferences. I also want to pay homage to one of my ancestors on my mother's side, who in the 19th century was here at the age of 12 portaging over Niagara Falls with a group of voyageurs. So that blood runs in my veins, and I feel connected to this place because of him. And I have his memoir in English and French, the French original and in English, on my website if anybody wants to read it. Amazing story. But let's get into it now. Do I press the right here? I want to start with a true story. This is a true story, a little bit of a warm-up. So I met a grandfather who told me about his little 5-year-old grandson. I'll call him Johnny. And he asked Johnny, he said, Johnny, what do you want to be when you grow up? A policeman? You know, typical, stereotypical occupations? Nope. A fireman? Nope. No, Grandpa said, Johnny, he said, I want to be retired. So this young boy obviously is an old soul, and so I'm considering the same thing at this point in my life. I want to talk to you about the link between whistleblowing and mobbing, and there is definitely a link, and thanks to those who helped guide me in my proposed presentation in terms of some of the sources I should be looking at. I want to then talk about the effectiveness or not of organizational policies and procedures that are explicitly intended to protect whistleblowers, and then go into the specific issues around publicly funded and regulated institutions. And I had the opportunity to attend the research conference on whistleblowing in Canada in Montreal in late May, and I want to share some takeaways from that experience. And then maybe propose, is there a way that we can consider joining forces? Because a lot of the individuals who get mobbed were also whistleblowers. So there might be an opportunity there, and then conclude and share some potential next steps. So you can see why this poor woman is biting her fingernails. Had I known, whistleblowing does come with recognized potential consequences. And I was shocked to read these figures. I didn't realize it was so high. But those who expose illegal or unethical practices, even if done very discreetly, very professionally, not making a lot of noise, going to the media, just, you know, having a chat with your superiors or going through normal channels, 60% or 60 to 70% of the time face retaliation from their employers. And internal whistleblowers, so the people who go within the organization, because many organizations have an internal process, make up 90% of corporate retaliation cases. So it's huge. And that retaliation includes bullying, harassment, threats of, and actual termination, as well as full-blown mobbing. I mean, where you are completely discredited and driven out of the organization one way or the other. So these are a few high-level statistics that I just want to share from the literature. And again, it's all two-thirds. In terms of job loss and forced retirement, which, by the way, is illegal. You cannot force someone to, in many jurisdictions. But it does happen that kind of pressure happens, or you're terminated and then offered a retirement package, afterwards. 69% of targeted whistleblowers are fired or forced out. 68% find their work suddenly placed under strict scrutiny. Ooh, questions that were never asked before are suddenly being asked. 64% receive uncharacteristically poor evaluations. So great evaluations until you blow the whistle, and then boop, everything changes. Peer mobbing and ostracism. 61% experience severe relationship breakdowns with colleagues, with all sorts of other co-workers. And industry blacklisting. So I think we're well aware of that. It's nearly impossible. You are labeled as a troublemaker, unable to find future employment in the same field. So what does that mean for effectiveness of whistleblower policies? Well, they're often ineffective in practice. That's the whole point, is that they actually don't work in practice. Why? Because there is, first of all, no independence in the way that the investigation or that the complaint or the whistleblowing is handled. There are conflicts of interest, especially if you're mentioning something that's happening at a superior level. People want to control, protect their egos and don't want to look back. So obviously there's an effort to bury it. There's a chilling effect on reporting due to the high potential of retaliation. So this is well known. In terms of people's street smarts, that if they bring it up, they are highly at risk. And the burden of proof of retaliation, I should have put of retaliation, falls on the whistleblower. So these are weaknesses in a lot of the policies around whistleblowing. So rather than the employer having to prove that they are not retaliating, it's the burden is on the whistleblower to prove that their employer is retaliating against them. And then, of course, there's all the denials that come with it. Can these policies be made more effective? Well, yes, they can be. I mean, anonymous third-party reporting channels, although we know there are people in this room who have, experienced that those are not necessarily 100% effective, but generally a third-party approach that's separated is a bit more effective. Explicit non-retaliation with remedies and independent appeals, but would love to hear some discussion on the implementation of that. And then a leadership commitment. I personally think this is the most important, is the leadership commitment with training and zero tolerance for retaliation. I am a whistleblower at heart. I'm the daughter of a whistleblower who was, my late mother, bless her heart. And in certain environments, I have been protected. I have worked in certain environments where I've raised concerns about ethical issues, even by my boss, but who, didn't fire me on the spot. He heard me out and he said, you know what, I disagree with you. This is something that I have to do. I don't think it's, as unethical as you say it is. And I kept my job. Like, he was a half-decent leader who was willing to hear me out, and I did not go over his head. I sometimes wondered, should I have gone over his head? Was it as big, a big enough deal that I should have made more noise about it? I didn't. It's a bit like the moral injury. What was the example Catherine gave, where sometimes I'm thinking, should I have gone further or not? Did I do the right thing? At least I brought it up. And at least he was a big enough person that he was able to hear me out. And, my employment was not at risk. And I don't think I was retaliated against in any way. But that's an exception. I mean, most of the time, it doesn't work that way. So I'm really concerned, like the previous speaker, about publicly funded and regulated institutions. So this is so jurisdiction-based, and so I'm going to speak about Canada at the federal level and the province where I live, which is Ontario, just across the river. Public servants are governed by the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. That does not include certain groups, which is interesting. The Canadian Armed Forces, and they have their issues. They have struggled with a lot of issues over the years. Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Communications Security Establishment Canada, those are exempt. Might believe the RCMP are also exempt. And then there are similar provincial statutes, and to a lesser extent, territorial statutes. The territories are not as well covered. Universities are generally considered, a lot of us are here from universities, independent entities that require internal processes. So that is a structural flaw right there. And so if you have not followed through on the internal process, then you won't be heard anywhere else. And if you've not had faith in the internal process, because you know that it's, set up a certain way, then you really can't get anywhere. There is, some would argue, a fallback position. Section 425 of the Canadian Criminal Code provides a universal baseline layer of protection across all sectors, in theory. Now, to what extent that's used, I'm not sure. Others may know in the room. And there are limitations and gaps with a lot of this legislation. Again, we talked about the burden of proof. So in reprisal complaints, the burden rests on the employee to prove that their penalization was a direct consequence of blowing the whistle. Very hard to do. Lack of universal rewards. So outside of financial watchdogs like the Securities Commission of Ontario or the Canada Revenue Agency's offshore tax programs, the systems rarely offer financial incentives for whistleblowers. And there are, the laws are generally outdated. So the PSDPA Review Task Force highlighted that the core federal public service legislation had gone without a major overhaul since 2007, and it's kind of stalled, okay? So it's in mothballs and it needs an overhaul. And one of my questions, which you might not see in the bottom here, and this has been coming up a lot in the conference, are non-disclosure agreements appropriate to cover up public sector wrongdoing? Because this is our money, okay? And these are public institutions. They presumably belong to all of us. I would say no, but anyway, it ends up happening, and we'd love to talk about the dynamics of that. So let me brief you a little bit on this conference on whistleblowing. I actually found out about it through an American colleague, through Jackie Garrick. Some of you know the name Jackie Garrick. She founded Whistleblowers of America. And she does a lot of very interesting kind of free events and has support groups. And apparently, she doesn't talk about her own case. A lot of us don't talk about our own cases for all sorts of reasons. I think she blew the whistle in the U.S. military. Kind of a, challenging place. And so she has started this, and she told me about this conference. So I said, so I was able to attend at least a good part of it. So what is happening? The whistleblowing research community in both English and French is consolidating. There was a conference back in 2022, which I was not aware of, and it's connected, it's binational, and it's international. And like the mobbing research community, the whistleblowing research community has a lot of individuals who've been attracted to doing research because they themselves have been whistleblowers. Not all of them. Some of them are just completely, they've never been through it themselves. They are interested in the topic, and they're getting into it for a number of other reasons. So it's that survivor or experience, which I found really interesting. It was a joint effort of the partners that I've listed, a lot of accountants involved, a lot of people in finance and accounting, because there's, again, a lot of shenanigans, right, when it comes to money, anywhere. And involved also an organization I didn't even know about called the Whistleblowing Canada Research Society, a bit of a shoestring operation, but there's devoted to the cause, a lot of free resources, toolkits, and this was free of charge. So the organizers, I guess, had so much financial support that they were able to offer this event free of charge, which was really great. So my question is, can whistleblowing and mobbing experts join forces? So, and thank you for Ching Li for pointing me to the work of Brian Martin, and I know that he was also participating last year. I don't know if he's online this year. So I was able to start looking at some of his work. I do need to dig into it in more detail, but he is really the expert who has brought together these two fields. He has, of course, separated them, but has noted, if I understand correctly, that these things often start to converge, and when the retaliation starts, it can and does escalate into workplace mobbing. Is a scoping review or knowledge synthesis in order? I mean, I would love to see that in general for workplace mobbing research, but for the link between whistleblowing and workplace mobbing, I mean, or different kinds of retaliation, including mobbing, a scoping review or knowledge synthesis, which is done according to a very specific methodology, would be, I think, extremely helpful. Could there be an opportunity for a joint conference or marry the two topics, special issue of the journal, or give the next conference a theme, right? Or maybe their next conference could have a theme that brings the two together. Could we work on joint research, but also joint campaigns to advance public policy? Because that gets more public attention. I mean, everybody gets upset when they hear that public funds have been misused for whatever reason, or that there's a public safety issue which has been covered up. I mean, if that message gets out, then you have public support, right? So it's something to consider. And as I say in the last bullet here, frame this work in the public interest. So it's not, yes, there's public health when it comes to mobbing, when it comes to retaliation, absolutely. But there's a public interest issue here, particularly when it comes to public institutions exposing leadership malpractice. I love that expression. It costs our society, right? It's costing our society, not just in lives, but in dollars, right? There's a financial issue associated with this, legal costs, settlements, etc. Like, where do they get the money for that's what I'm wondering. Where do the public institutions get the money? I've put up a photo here of Jackie Garrick, Dr. Jackie Garrick, Pamela Forward, who runs the Whistleblowing Research Society. And I want to conclude with some potential next steps. I know I have 3 minutes left. So I'm still learning, so please don't, I mean, if you're going to get into the details of the literature on this, I may not be fully on top of it. So I'm really learning about this, the link between the two, and want to continue to explore that. I have 5 minutes? Okay. Workplace mobbing is a form of collective retaliation to eliminate, discredit an individual with the blessing or active involvement of leadership. I mean, that's my little short form definition. But whistleblowing, as I mentioned, even if done very discreetly, very respectfully, there's a woman in Australia, we've got some Australians I know online and here, Jo Tarnowski. She was the quietest, sweetest diplomat who raised an issue very discreetly with her boss and was it was just awful. And so she went public. She had a whole press conference. And anyway, there was some inappropriate behavior. It may have been sexual harassment, I'm not sure. Really paid the price, like brutally, and it was a huge eye-opener for her. Anyway, she went public, and it'd be great to have her involved in some of our discussions. So who in this room is interested? But I think it has to be done by jurisdiction. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing. So I'm looking for people from Ontario because it's too complicated when you go into another jurisdiction. Not that we can't share information with other jurisdictions. And are the sites that are notorious for workplace mobbing, such as healthcare institutions, universities, equipped to deal with retaliation against whistleblowers? I would suspect no, but again, something to talk about. So bring on your questions and comments. I have dedicated this to the memory. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dr. Shiv Chopra. Show of hands from the room. Oh my gosh, I actually had a chance to meet him once. Sadly, he's passed away. He was a veterinarian, and he was employed by Health Canada and was asked to advise on the safety of bovine growth hormone. And he said, I'm sorry, the evidence is like, no, we can't go there. And this is before, there were all those scandals that happened. He was, oh my God, completely discredited. There were 2 other scientists. They all were eventually terminated. I mean, the government fought this for years and years, and then it went up, and he was finally, to this day, we don't allow bovine growth hormone in Canada, and he sacrificed his whole career. I think posthumously is, or even before his death, there was recognition of the good work he did, but the price he paid, and the 2 other colleagues as well. So as someone who works on food systems and, the public health dimension of that. Like, I just want to honor what he did, and all others in this room, online, who have, you know, been trying to, you know, protect the public in whatever way. So, Nyawa, merci, thank you, and I look forward to our discussion period.